So Galarian Slowking's pretty good tanky wise with 95 health, 80 defense, and 110 special defense. So he's bulky. He's bulky when it comes to defenses. 110 special attack's pretty good, especially when you're tanky. It's good so you can actually put out some damage. 65 attack. He'll never be an attacker pretty much. And 30 speed's really good for things like Trick Room. And because you're a tank, you don't necessarily need to be really fast. And its abilities are Curious Medicine, Own Tempo, and Regenerator. Its best ability I would say is Regenerator because both of these are very situational. And Curious Medicine can hurt you sometimes depending on, like, because if you raise your stats and then switch it in, especially if it's your last Pokemon or something like that, it'll screw you over and get rid of all your stat changes. And Own Tempo is, you're not a physical attacker, so Intimidate doesn't really matter. And you'll very rarely get hit with like a Confuser or something like that, especially now that Confusion's been nerfed. And Regenerator is just honestly an amazing ability. You restore a third of your health every time you switch out. And Galarian Slowking has its signature ability, Eerie Spell, which is 80 base power and removes 3 PP from the target's last move, which is really good if they're using moves with high base power, like Focus Blast or Blizzard, Flare Blitz, like any of the not Flare Blitz, but Fire Blast, all the moves that have low PP. Taking away 3 is a lot, and it can add up, especially if you can hit them with it like twice. It'll do a lot, but one way to run them is to take full use of that Regenerator, and I love whenever something has Regenerator, especially when it has a good special attack, a good attack stat, and decent bulk. Just Regenerator, and then Specs, and just go in, especially on a Trick Room. If you can get this on a Trick Room, this will do a ton of damage, but pretty much, even if without Trick Room, you just come in and you do a super effective hit with Choice Specs, and come in and try to shred. Pretty much Dual Stab, Psychic, and Sledge Wave. And then Sludge Wave / Sledge Bomb. Sludge Wave does more damage than Sledge Bomb, but Sledge Bomb has a 30% chance to poison, so it's up to you. I like the more damage. And then Flamethrower, Ice Beam. You could also replace one of these two with Surf, but at the same time, Ice Beam's really good now that Garchomp and Dragonite are in the game. Flamethrower is really good for Steel types, especially because you're poison. But Flamethrower is really good, especially on things like Metagross. And because you're Psychic Poison, you can actually, like, these 3 moves alone would get walled out by a Salazzle, for example, but Psychic will hit it super effective. So it's pretty good coverage overall. Again, you can throw in Surf for one of these two, but I like this to deal with pretty much everything. And you just come in, do a ton of damage, and then once you take some good damage, like, once you get under, like, 30%, you just switch out and get a third of your health back for free. And a really good thing about Regenerator is, let's say an ally gets KO'd, you switch in Galarian Slowking, and then you switch out again, now you're at full health. So there are things you can do like that to play around it, especially with Regenerator, which is really good. And because you're poison, you can use the Black Sludge. So, it frees up a spot, especially if you want leftovers on something else, because it's pretty much leftovers if you're poison type, and if not, you lose 1 health. So you can do some things like Trick with Black Sludge as like a last move, as a last resort type thing. But another way is to, another thing that makes Galarian Slowking so good is because even though it has like decent defense, for example, but it has good overall tankiness, it also has setup moves like Calm Mind and Iron Defense, so it can raise its stats too, which is really good. But pretty much this one is Calm Mind with Black Sludge and just Slack Off. So you want to just get as much, you want to Calm Mind and you'll heal every turn with Black Sludge, and you have Slack Off in case you get low. And then Stored Power is perfect for any setup, because every time you raise one of your stats, each +1 you get raises the base power by 20. So after 2 Calm Minds, you'll have 100 base power on this. So if you get 3 and more, like, you'll get to the point where Galarian Slowking is really bulky specially, so you'll take no damage from special defense. You're bulky defensively enough. You have Slack Off and Black Sludge, which will heal you, and Stored Power will do a ton of damage. And then you could either run Sludge Wave again or Sludge Bomb, depending on what you want for sab or coverage, or you could run something like this. This gets watered by Metagross, so Flamethrower is really good Flamethrower is really good just for Steel types in general, especially if they think you're running Dual Stab. Flamethrower is really good. Ice Beam, anything that can hit Dark type's really good. If it got something like a Dazzling Gleam, that'd be really good. But pretty much either Sludge Wave or Flamethrower, Ice Beam, Surf. Just another coverage move in this last slot with this, because your main bread and butter is going to be Stored Power, especially once you get a couple Calm Minds. And as long as you don't get hit with a massive physical hit, you'll be fine. And for abilities, again, Curious Medicine also only does things in doubles, which kind of sucks that it doesn't do anything to enemies. And then Own Tempo, you're not really that worried about getting confused. Regenerator, though, like, the other two abilities aren't great. The Regenerator has its use in that, one, if you get blown up while trying to get set up, you get a good amount of health back. or if you've set up like 2 Calm Minds, or you set up a couple Calm Minds and then they switch in a physical attacker that could really hurt you, or that you hit them once and then, or they hit you and they do a ton of damage and then you have to switch out, you'll get health back to where you can read, if you need to do the strategy later, you can come back in and start setting up the Calm Minds and Slag Off to get back to full health. So Regenerator is good as a sort of fallback option. It's not going to help you most times, but it's a good fallback. But another thing you can do with Galarian Slowking is just Thunder Wave Hex, which is really good. Black Sledge. You could also drop one of these 2 moves for Slack Off if you want the sustain, which is really good too because Thunder Wave has a chance to paralyze them. So if they get paralyzed and you heal, that's a win-win. But Regenerator kind of accomplishes the same thing, especially if you switch out and they get paralyzed and you get a free switch in. But pretty much you want to come in Thunder Wave and then take things down with Hex, Airy Spell, and Sledge Wave. Hex, again, has 130 base power, which is really good, and they have a chance to get paralyzed every turn. And you'll heal from Black Sludge, and if your health gets low, you can switch out with Regenerator and then come in later and play around like that. Because you could always come in, you could Thunder Wave, take a hit and then switch out, or take a hit, Thunder Wave, and then switch out, and then come back in later with pretty much full health and do the same thing. And later you just literally could come in, Thunder Wave, and switch back out. So again, Hex, Thunder Wave, and then whatever 2 moves you want. Again, Airy Spell is kind of good for like a staller, for more of a stally set like this is. You're not going to do a ton of damage. You could also run something like a Nasty Plot if you want, instead of, you can run a Nasty Plot instead of one of these 2 and then run Stab, Hex. Probably I would keep Poison though. If you're going to run Stab and Hex, I'd run Poison so you don't get walled out by Dark types. So get rid of Airy Spell and you can run something like a Nasty Plot to try to set up while they're paralyzed every turn. And if they switch something in, you either can switch out or just Thunder Wave it and then set up again. The problem with this though is if you take a big hit, especially before they're paralyzed, or they just hit through paralysis twice, they kind of put you in a spot where the Nasty Plot, you won't get the most out of it, and it'd be better just to use 2 moves twice. But this is a Dynamax Galarian Slowking, max health, max special attack. Again, your ability doesn't really matter unless you're running doubles and you want to run Curious Medicine. Your ability does not matter while Dynamaxed. Again, Life Orb, because the choice items don't do anything, so Life Orb's your best bet. And then Future Sight, Belch, Blizzard, Fire Blast, or there's some other moves you could run with there. You could also throw in a Hydro Pump or Focus Blast. Focus Blast is there only there for coverage because it raises your attack, which is useless. Hydro Pump brings the rain. Blizzard brings Ice, which could be big. It could help you or hurt you, but it's really good now. It's good, but now it's extra good because of all the 4x weaknesses. Same with Fire Blast. And then Belch and Future Sight. Belch actually does a 95 base power, so if you want, you can replace Belch with either Sludge Bomb or Sludge Wave for 5 less base power, but a move you can actually use when you're not Dynamaxed. So you can play around it with like that, but it raises your special attack, which is really good. And Future Sight brings Psychic Terrain. And if you can get this, especially under a Trick Room or something like that, or Trick Room, I shouldn't say something like that. If you can get it with a Trick Room, you could also throw in like a Nasty Plot, for example, instead of one of these moves. Probably, it's up to you. It's whatever you're not worried about between Ice and Fire, and throw in a Nasty Plot. That way with Trick Room and Nasty Plot, you'll shred just about everything, especially Belch can still raise your special attack. So go from there and just do a ton of damage. And Regenerator is good though if you survived all 3 turns of Dynamax and then you switch out and gain health back. So it's really good, especially if you're low health or Trick Room runs out at the end of Dynamax. You can kind of save Galarian Slowking for later just to tank a hit and KO something with. That's the only problem. That's why I would say, like, instead of Belch, you can run Sludge Wave or Sludge Bomb just so you have another move when you're not Dynamax, because these both have low accuracy and Future Sight doesn't hit for 2 turns. So if you have to bring it in later just to tank a hit and KO something, it's really good to have the Sludge Wave or Sludge Bomb, whatever you would like. And this is more of a doubles, making use of the Curious Medicine, because I don't think Airy Spell doesn't hit both. But another way to use it in doubles, Expanding Force, if in Psychic Terrain it hits both opponents, so if you can bring it in with a Psychic Terrain or a Dynamax next to it that uses a Psychic move, it could be really good. And it has 1.5 power, so it has 120 base power and hits both. Sludge Wave hits both with 95 base power. You could also run a Sludge Bomb if you want to be able to do a lot more damage to one, because if it hits both, it does less damage overall. Surf just hits both opponents. It also has Muddy Water, but Muddy Water has 85 accuracy, so especially in doubles, you don't want to risk, it could miss. But I like the Switch's Berry too, just for that burst healing in doubles, especially if they try to focus you or something like that. It could be the difference between surviving and not. But Thunder Wave, I like Thunder Wave just as a nuisance move to slow something down, or if your ally's faster and you need to slow something down with a Thunder Wave, you could go with that. It also has a light screen, so you could do some things like that in doubles. But I like this set. Or you can run the tanky one and just go max defense, depending on if you want to just do more damage and be bulky overall, or you want to be more of a mixed tank. I just kind of like this, especially if, again, Trick Room, for example. This one's really good because they do a ton of damage. But some of the other moves Galarian Slowking has are like Scald, for example, which has a chance to burn. So if you're running a tankier one, if you're not running Thunder Wave, like if you have a chance to burn them, that's really good because it halves their attack, which makes you even more tanky defensively. If you want to run something like Scald, Slack Off, and something, and like go from there. Like, or example, you want to run Scald on this set instead of Sledge Wave. That way you burn them and you really take no damage from physical attacks. Power Gem's just good coverage with Rock, like no additional effect, but that's good coverage, 80 base power, a special Rock move. Venoshock's really good if you set up something like Toxic Spikes, or in doubles, you poison them, or you just poison them with another Pokemon, and then switch in Galarian Slowking, Trick Room or not. Venoshock has 130 base power, Stab, which is pretty good on a 110 attack. And Icy One's another doubles move, to where you slow down both allies in doubles. So like if you're not running Trick Room, or if you have an ally that's not the fastest thing, but it is decently fast, just come in with an Icy Wind, slow them down, and that ally could take off and just do a lot. So Icy Wind's just good coverage, and it does things like break sashes. It does have 95 accuracy, but it's not, it could screw you over sometimes, but it's not terrible. Like for example, in this one, instead of Thunder Wave, you can run Icy Wind just to have that, to slow them down, which could be a difference maker later in the battle. Weather Ball's really good, especially in doubles if your ally is Dynamaxed and they using weather. So for example, Hydro Pump, Fire Blast, Blizzard, something like that. That gives you pretty much an extra more so with, it just gives you another move. Honestly, it has higher base power than Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, because it'll have 100 base power, so it'll have 100% accuracy and 100 base power, which is more than Flamethrower, Ice Beam, and pretty much everything else. Foul Play is also an option, a sneaky option to throw in on pretty much any moveset, because it uses your target's attack stat. So even though your attack's only 65, Foul Play is always an option to throw in just to do damage. Again, Sledge Bomb, 30% chance, but less damage than Sledge Wave, but it hits one opponent in doubles. Shadow Ball is also, same with Power Gem. Shadow Ball is pretty much the same thing, 80 base power, but it has a chance to lower their special defense. It's just coverage at this point. Or Shadow Ball is pretty much just coverage. But again, the two Dynamax moves. But some of the other things, like Trick Lagging Tail with Galarian Slowking, is a really funny thing that you can do, because it's so slow anyway. So pretty much whatever you give the Lagging Tail to, especially like a Ninjask, for example, this shuts down Ninjask. But Trick Lagging Tail, you're already dead last, so it doesn't matter. But then you Trick, because you're already super slow, but you Trick and give whatever you want Lagging Tail, which means they will literally always go in that priority bracket. They'll always go last. So if you're all using 0 priority moves, they'll go dead last every single time, which is really good. But Venom Drench, if they're poisoned, in doubles, Venom Drench hits both opponents. So if you do something like Poison, Gas, Venom Drench, that's really good because they'll lower all their offensive stats by 1. Iron Defense to raise up your defense. It doubles your defense, which is good. The only problem with Iron Defense, if you run Iron Defense, the problem becomes you'd have to run Iron Defense and then Stored Power, because you can't, because you run Iron Defense, Slack Off, Stored Power, and then unless you want to get just one offensive move, you can't run Calm Mind or Amnesia or anything like that. It sucks it doesn't get a Cosmic Power, but you could run Iron Defense, Slack Off, and you could run pretty much this set, but with Iron Defense instead, and just run Max Special Defense and just bank off that Stored Power to a ton of damage. But I like this one better because you also have that Sludge Wave, which is going to do a ton of damage because you're raising your special attack. It also has Nasty Plot. Again, like if you Dynamax, for example, in Trick Room, Nasty Plot, and then Dynamax and just do a ton of damage. Or you could just Nasty Plot with the Regenerator and just go from there. The only problem though is because of, unless you're in Trick Room, you'll get hit, did a Nasty Plot, get hit again, and then do damage. So at that point, whatever they switch in is faster than you. So you kind of put yourself in a bad spot to where you're too slow. You're too slow to really make use of Nasty Plot unless you're Dynamaxed. Or unless you're in Trick Room. Even Dynamax, unless you're in Trick Room, you can't really make the most out of Nasty Plot because you're not getting any bulkier. In doubles, Heal Pulse is really good. Raises your allies health by 50%. Yawn's always an option in any moveset to put them to sleep after a turn, because then they're forced with an option of, do they attack you or do they switch out and give you whatever? So you kind of put yourself in a spot, or you kind of put your opponent into a spot where they have to take a risk one way or the other. Swagger in doubles, or Swagger in general, he raises their attack by 2 and confuse them and go from there. Psych Up's really good to a Galarian Slowking, especially if you put it next to something that has Cosmic Power. Or something like, yeah, pretty much Cosmic Power is really good if you can Psych Up that, because then you'll have your defenses really, especially if you can run like Psych Up, Slack Off, and then 2 offensive moves, whether you're stealing a Cosmic Power or you're stealing a Calm Mind or whatever. Once you start stealing, you can steal pretty much, or especially in doubles. Doubles is where really Psych Up's the best, because otherwise you have to depend on your opponent. But you come in doubles on something that's already set up with a bunch of Cosmic Powers, for example, or Calm Minds, and you just Psych Up, and in one turn you have everything that they set up. And then it's pretty much like not a free baton pass, but you can make use of it and really get Galarian Slowking set up really quickly. It also has access to Amnesia. Again, like Amnesia, Iron Defense, but you can't, you run the risk of just not being able to do enough damage, or they switch in something that you Amnesia a lot, and then switch in a physical attacker, and you pretty much wasted all that setup. It also has access to Curse, but it raises your attack. Like, you might as well run Iron Defense instead of Curse, because it's pretty much better. The attack means nothing. The minus speed doesn't really mean anything because you're so slow, and you can get a +2 defense instead of a +1 with Iron Defense, so it's not really worth it. And then Safeguard. Safeguard's in double Safeguard's. Safeguard's just a good move in general, but I think there are better Pokemon that use it than Slowking, because you're wasting a turn on that, and if they weren't going to use status anyway, then it doesn't mean anything. But that's how to use Slowking. That's how to use Galarian Slowking in Pokemon Sword and Shield.